So I'm Cora Fedesna. My pronouns are she, her. I'm going to be talking about lessons learned when a dev does Opsy things. This is my Twitter handle over here, Cora in Chicago. If you have any need or any want, I just tweeted out a PDF of my slides if you want to follow along closer to your eyes on there. And there's for the conference. So I am an engineer at ActiveCampaign. We are a tech marketing firm. We have a platform that small, like mom and pop shops up to medium-sized businesses use for their marketing. We help them automate and personalize their marketing. So I've had the title of software engineer. I've been a developer. The difference between those two is about 50 grand. And I've also been a tech organizer. These are all the titles I've held in the tech world. So these are the titles I've never had. You'll never see these next to my name. You won't see DevOps either next to my name on LinkedIn. Not there. So this is where I come from. My domain knowledge is in the engineering field, in the software, in the business logic. It's not on the Opsy side. So the story begins with the de-alignment of the SREs at ActiveCampaign. Also known as when I joined about a year ago, a little bit less than a year on there. So when the SREs were aligned at ActiveCampaign, that meant that they had a team that they were responsible for. They came to the stand-ups. The managers and the product people could assign them some stories. They spent part of their time in doing things for the team. You could grab them afterwards. They spent part of their time doing SRE things. And they spent part of their time doing on-call and firefighting. So those are the three areas. With de-alignment, they're no longer in your stand. They're no longer aligned to the team. They are SRE consultants, meaning they do tickets that come onto the SRE ticket board. You don't know which SRE you're going to get. They are in our Slack channel that is a public SRE one where you can search for all the answers and ask them anything. And they also have office hours. If you want to go ask them questions in person, you can go talk to them in person to get better explanations. So my team was a little special snowflake, and we got to keep our SRE for just a little bit longer, which was nice. So part of this de-alignment was that engineers get to do Opsy things. We have to take over some of the tasks that we can no longer assign these tickets to the SREs to do. The opposite side of that is that we have to. We have to do these things that are outside our normal realm domain of knowledge. And this is kind of scary, because when you start talking about infrastructure stuff, and when you're talking about the ops side, you worry about making a mistake, causing customers to not be able to use your services, causing money to just flow out the door like crazy, people to get really mad at you, pressure. So we had a ticket come in. I remember my team's special snowflake. We get to keep our SREs a little bit longer. But we know he's going. He's going some way soon. So we had this ticket for a new service. We have microservices that didn't have a pipeline yet. And the pipeline needed to be built. The infrastructure needed to be put in. We put it in with Terraform. My company uses all AWS stuff. So he could have done that ticket. We could have assigned it to him. But he said, you all need to learn. You need to be doing this on your own. So I always like new things. So I said, I'll do it. I'll do it. I'll do it. Terraform, what's that? Actually, I'd heard about Terraform, but I knew it was infrastructure as code. And that's all I knew. I knew it was cool. Terraform was the word. Infrastructure as code. Never seen it. So as an engineer, and I do Java, so this is where I live. I live in my command line a lot of the time. If I want to do my integration, I just run this. That's all you need to do. Just run that either Gradle clean build or Maven clean build. I'm very flexible. And if I want to deploy it locally, I'll do either Gradle or Maven, clean build. And I might do it. I'll also do a Docker compose up. It's advanced. OK? So my task on this ticket, I had to make the CI/CD pipeline. I had to make the infrastructure that we needed for this service. I had to get someone to apply it, because Terraform needs to be applied. And I also had to learn how to write Terraform, so that probably should have been the first thing. Good thing for me picking this up was that my team had already delved into Terraform. We wrote some really kind of poorly structured Terraform. Not the best examples, but it works. So I could follow along what they did and kind of write what we needed. So this is an example of all the files that I needed to run the test, okay, to run the CI. We have our AWS resources that's building, the building of the actual service. We used code build to run it through the test. That's an AWS product. And we had variables that we used throughout. We also have our deployment, more files, a lot more files on here, notice. We used code pipeline, which is another AWS, to deploy it. Notice how I'm doing my AWS main on the top of each of them. I have to declare my. I thought that was crazy. So I was like, what? In the terminal, I just write maven clean build. Why would I need to make these again? Why do I have to have 2 times? So these are all the steps that I followed. Notice the sheer number of them to get this ticket done. And maybe we come to the PR comments and the updates. Maybe that was repeated a few more times. I didn't need to bother you with all those iterations on there. So finally, we got to the part. And this one-on-one was a very serious, you need to, walking through and telling me the basics of it. And maybe I didn't do the tutorial all the way through the first time. Maybe I just read it, and I had to go back and actually do it again. So it got applied. Now we're moving on in our timeline. And Dealignment is coming further along. And they've made all the engineers, have to open up their phone during stand. They're like, OK, where's your app for your being on call? Do you have it installed? Everyone's checking in stands. Our SRE who's there, who knows? We're not in prod. He starts talking about what things you need to do, ways to prepare for being on call when we finally are call in a meaningful way. We're still on call. So all the teams throughout the whole company, we go on call, which SREs love. Because sometimes when the page goes off, they're not the first ones in the room anymore. After this, we have a business decision that happened. We were in GitHub over here with code pipeline, code build for AWS. And the decision from above came that for business reasons, we're moving over to GitLab on here. Partially a money reason. Partially it's the scalability that we needed. Some of our services. There was decisions made above there. All I know is moving from that icon to this icon. And I have to figure out a new system. But that also means that all of the pipeline that I built before has to be built again. So also with this, we are moving into Kubernetes, which is the hot stuff. And I had heard about Kubernetes, and I knew a little bit about it, but I'd never been able to do it. And now, because my team was so new, the stuff we had wasn't in prod yet, they were like, you just go in there. Go into Kubernetes. And we're like, yes, we will. Which was fun, OK? You just say it 3 times, and it makes you smile. So I have to build the pipeline again. So this is how I'm building my CI/CD pipeline. So the biggest part in there is underneath that include projects DevOps / name of the project. That project did all these magical things behind the wheel. So I made one YAML file. This is the start of it. And our DevOps team made all the other pieces happen. So I have some caching I put into this YAML file. I have how I want to run my tests. Notice great old clean test. I know what that is. That's what I use every day. The build process in here. If you notice, you come back down here, you see some Docker parts. I know some Docker pushes, Docker build. I know those terms. Build that up. Variables that we needed. Variables that I know from my .properties files, putting in there. So this was a lovely way to make my CI pipeline. It's one file, not like you saw like 4 or 5 before, folders. This is one file. A lot of it was magic from the DevOps team doing behind there. And by that magic, I mean we would set it up and rerun it because we're one of the first teams doing it. And then we'd be like, Oh, it's not working, it's not working, it's not working. Go to Slack. Put in the message, it's not working. And then they go, oh, they fixed something, and then it'd work. Lovely, it was fun. Let me see, I'm going the wrong way. Wrong way. And then our YAML file, which I actually even forgot this. So this is what made our Kubernetes happen. But if you know this is not an extra Kubernetes file. If you've seen one, this is just attributes and value, key value pairs here. This is because our DevOps team abstracted that out for us. So to make everything go into Kubernetes, we just had to put in the attributes we wanted, and then it'd run. So book time in our timeline, we'd known that Kubernetes was coming. We'd started working with it. And I said, Director of Engineering, we need books. We need to read about this. And he said, give me the book name. And so I slacked him with book's name. And he said, how many? And I said, almost double the number that I actually needed. Because caring is sharing. And so we shared book club, which were really successful. We read chapters 1 through 7. I think there are 17 chapters in that book. 1 through 7 is really a lot of what we needed. It was great to do because my team was one of the first doing Kubernetes with our DevOps project. But we still need to know what was going on underneath the hood, because sometimes you want to ask for things, and if you don't know what's around to ask for, you can't ask for it. Okay? Also, we had another team that had been doing Kubernetes. They were ahead of us. They were in Kubernetes without our DevOps internal project. So they were doing Kubernetes with Helm. And then we had other people in the book club who they were on existing applications that were out in prod, and they weren't moved to Kubernetes at first. So this is them learning what's to come. So Kubernetes was fun. We tried to run it locally on our laptops, and our cats really love that because it makes your laptop run really hot. But you have to worry about burning your kitties with those. So we moved that off and just do Docker in there, and we do Kubernetes and staging. So CI/CD has become much easier. We moved one service over, much easier to move all the services over. We kind of shared around, and each one of our team kind of took a different service to move it over, so you have that whole experience, and then you can look back and see. So back to what Terraform is, because I had to learn with this. Terraform is a HashiCorp product. They have several products. It was an open source one. They have a very nice tutorial, and I'll go back to why I had to do that tutorial kind of 2 times. So the first time I went to that tutorial, and I started reading through how to do it, and I came across this part down here. So it was warning that I could incur costs. And I was told, well, you just set it up, and you probably won't, most it could be is a couple dollars. And I'm like, a couple dollars? I'm sorry. I have a child to get through college eventually in like 18 years. Who knows what the cost of college will be then? I'm not putting out my personal credit card to learn. I'm kind of snuck. So one of my colleagues, someone had not shut off the Sandbox AWS account. So they gave me one of those, and I went and played. And then I actually went through the tutorial doing the commands. And the difference between going through the tutorial and not actually running the commands and going through the tutorial and running the commands is a world of difference. So when a dev is looking at Kubernetes, don't worry about how much this stuff is, but just look at the volume of attributes on here. This is what engineers, this is for a MySQL database. This is the infrastructure knowledge that we have about this. We know about the version because we had to choose it when we imported it in on our Grader or Maven or whatever dependency management we had, that library. We know about the version from there. We know about the username because we had to set it up, and we had to set up a variable to put as it to use throughout our application. We had that password, we had to set one up for local development, and we had to set up a variable for there. And we really don't care what those two are as long as they match within the database. We do care what the version is because, well, we care about the password because we want to make sure it's safe and secure. But the version number we care about because every once in a while you run into a bug or an issue, and you're like, what is that? And it's because some sort of version. But those are the 3 things. But look at all these other parts of there. We don't deal with that in our day-to-day life. When we're coding for the business, like making a service, making it run, fixing bugs, putting in new features. We don't deal with the other parts of it. Code has good and bad qualities, and there's many of these qualities can be kind of universal to any code. Between Terraform and Java, which is what I do, some good things are when they're modular, when you have variables used, you have documentation, you have good examples if you're making code that other people are going to use, making libraries or API endpoints. Bad code is pretty universal. If it's all in one file, all in one class, usually that's a no-no. Somewhere there's probably one use case where you want it all in one, but most likely no. Hard-coded values also never good, never, no. And if they don't follow the example. If you have an example and it doesn't actually follow it, oh, that's no. Some other bad things is if it doesn't run. Worse things, if it runs, but it does something very inadvertent. So when I'm starting to code up my Terraform, I first need to declare a module in the main Terraform area, repo. This is the SREs had their own Terraform repo for the SRE stuff that went out for all of it. And then putting in my module, I was declaring my service. And see that where the arrow is pointing to, that's saying that there's some more code that when that Terraform runs and applies, it should go look over in these files over here. Just come over here and make sure you run these two. OK, just come on over. The rest of these are just variables passed in. So a resource, kind of a founding block of Terraform is making a resource. So resources are kind of a declaration of almost like an object, you would say, or a module. So in this one, I'm declaring an S3 bucket. Just declaring that as I want one. OK, I want one. And I give it a name, and I give it a couple of little attributes. So it's not all I need to do for it, but if I ran this would make it, in a Terraform that I ran, it would make this bucket for me. When you're naming the resource, you have it's a two-part name. The first part of the name, IntelliJ really encourages you to name it, about what the service is. They help you out on that. They say, don't just name it cat. Name it AWS stuff. And then the second part of the name could be what you want. So in Terraform documentation, which is lovely, there is always examples of how to make your resource for any infrastructure that you want in AWS. Now, next thing is data blocks. Data blocks, it took me 2 times being explained to this to understand what it is. So a data block is a way to get data from, when it runs, it calls out to the API endpoint in AWS. This one will, because we do AWS. It calls out and it says, hey, AWS, look at your VPCs, and can you hand me back the one tagged for this company's for that region that I've named? Just hand me back all the information for it. And then it puts it in a little object that you can use around. So you see how this is used. This is the same declaration over here. And here's where I'm using it. I'm saying data. It's coming from the data block. I say the name, OK, the first part of the name, the second part of the name. And then I say .id. And that'll go into there and insert in all the IDs that I need from that resource in AWS. I don't never need to know what those IDs are. I never need to see them. OK? Variables are ways to just abstract it out so you don't have hard-coded values in your Terraform, in the main part. So you can put them all in that little file called variables that you saw earlier. So you can have them with a default setting, and you can have them without a default setting. You don't have to put that in there. And you probably shouldn't for passwords. Shouldn't just code it out. You can have a description and a type in there. You don't have to, but you can. So data versus variables, why would you use one versus the other? The data blocks, what they do is that if the Terraform runs, if someone makes the change to what the VPC IDs are, the Terraform, because you have that module part and it refers to the files over here, it'll update that. It'll say, oh, hold on, I'm referenced. Update. And with variables, they're always going to be kind of static. OK, with variables, you can also have a tf-vars one so that you don't have to manually put them in when you're running the Terraform. If you, unlike when you're coding, you look for Stack Overflow for your answers. If you don't know how to do something, in Terraform, you actually look for Terraform documentation. And that's actually the first place you should look, which is very odd to me. I'm like, what? And they have nice examples and handy-dandy cautions to make sure you don't run into trouble. Some tricky parts of that. You can accidentally destroy a database. That's lovely to find out. You should actually move that database if you're moving it from one region to another. You should do that manually, because Terraform will just be like, oh, let me destroy you and make you a new one. Aren't you happy? You can commit your passwords. And it can really feel, when it's going wrong, it can feel really weird because you're dealing with infrastructure. And that seems terribly serious, more serious than the code. So when you think, oh, my Lord, am I making this in the wrong place? Or is there something wrong? Why are there these errors here? Get a little nervous, OK? Get a little anxiety. So some commands from Terraform. Terraform format is just a command that you run in your command line, and it kind of lints it, makes it all look nice and pretty lined up. You can commit your code, and then Terraform init initializes the Terraform plan. Terraform plan looks at the code that you have versus what's in your state bucket, or wherever you're keeping your state of what's actually your infrastructure. It looks at that and says, OK, what's the difference? And do we have any errors? And you can clean up errors there. And Terraform applies kind of more of the scary one. It's where it calls out to the API, the AWS API endpoints, and it actually creates your S3 bucket or creates your database for you. So moving along, next time we do Terraform, we have run through a lot less steps in there, which is nice. Then I lose my SRE leaves my team. He stops coming to stand up. We still see him. When we talk to him in the halls, we talk about lunch or Star Wars or plants. We don't talk about SRE stuff. I live in the world of Spring, Java with Docker. But now I'm living in the world also where I'm thinking about my database. Where's my S3 bucket? API security, and the K8s cluster that I'm dealing with. So some things are still a struggle for me. These are still a struggle. I've been explaining them. They've been explained to me many times. They are still hard. OK? They all bound down to this word. It's kind of a scary one. And I looked up definitions, and I thought, well, that doesn't really help very much. Their definitions don't help. So IAM is like an AWS permissions thing. It's what you can do to a resource. AWS made this. They're trying to make it better. It's what can one service do to this resource? So this one allows you, for the S3 bucket, to put something in, to get something out. You cannot delete. OK? It's also lovely in that over here, we're just declaring what the IAM policy is. Up here, we are rolling that up into actual making the policy, and then we are making the role, and then there's another part that you don't see here. We're actually attaching that role onto the source. Why all these steps? I don't know. Cidre, I look up every night, and I don't quite get it. It's called classless. Apparently, there used to be a class version. But if you look at it, it's an IP address with a slash at the end. OK? And the slash in gives you a range of options at the very end so you can use it. Oddly enough, this is one of the diagrams I found. It doesn't help you, does it? But one thing you can note on there, if you're looking at it, look at it closely enough, you'll see that as the numbers after the slash get larger, the number of IP addresses that you have available are smaller. So virtual private clouds is a way that they isolate things off in the cloud. AWS is not the only one who does it. And they all have a big CIDR block for you. And then you kind of subnet break those down into smaller CIDR blocks if you decide to have one part of your company over here and one part of your company over here in a VPC. People decide, either companies say one big VPC for everyone or little ones, or they divide it up. OK. So you have these, you can get from your VPC, you can get the cidre block from there using data. Yeah. I look at this still, and I have trouble. So the last part we run into is tuning for my system. We generated load onto our system to be able to test and see where does our infrastructure have problems, where do we have any code problems. Generating a lot of load onto our system, be able to regulate that. And you're thinking about what are the problem points that you could see. You're also thinking about, will it cause an alert or a page? Will it wake someone up? Hopefully this is not a customer thing. And can I prevent this? So we're looking at lots of different places when we're doing this, which is weird for an engineer because we're looking at our console and in our IDE. And here we're looking at 4 different places. We're looking at the AWS console, which is not as very user-friendly. You go to the RADs. You can wind up on this page, and you don't know where your databases are. You have to go over there. It's very nice. They say, like, oh, you can create a database. I'm still trying to get to my databases. I've not landed on them yet. To actually get some metrics from them to look at it. You can go to Datadog. You have to pick from a large selection of things to figure out how to line up your metrics. A long selection of metrics to figure out which ones you need. If you were lucky like me, someone else has made a board that you can just clone and copy in. Thank you, DevOps team. I clone this a lot. You can look for Kibana for your logs, lots of options on your logs. Really, as an engineer, I only think about looking at my log message. But your messages are only as good as what you put in there, which is always past Cora. And your kubectl commands, ones that I have to remember to have somewhere so I can copy and paste them into the console. If you notice, I don't actually have any, because SREs are now dealigned, they have time to make services like handy dandy one that allows me to authenticate in and and access my staging kubectl pods from my command line, which is nice. Very nice. And then you modify, and then you repeat that process over and over and over again. So this is the last time Terraform was applied, the number of steps on my team. I didn't apply it. I let someone else do it. Not that I applied. I let someone else do the terraforming because I thought someone else would have a chance to have that fun. This is kind of fun. It's something different. So the story ends with now. SREs are dealigned. Our team is pretty independent, and all the other teams at ActiveCampaign are moving from GitHub to GitLab. They are building their own pipelines, and they are, we're getting independent from our SREs. So thank ActiveCampaign because they helped send me here, and they also, it's a really fun place to be. And I've been doing a lot in this last year. We're also hiring. And thanks to all of you.
My background is SRE and operations, so one of the challenges that I'm having is finding ways to compartmentalize a lot of the complexities, so this is actually easier to kind of shift onto engineering teams. A lot of taking responsibility for the full ownership of your code from authorship all the way to being in front of the end user. There's a lot more going on there, and I think that just trying to push that, shift it left without kind of doing the training or doing any additional work to decomplexify is unwelcome, and I also don't think it's like the right thing to do. I think that we need to be enablers, and I think that so one of the challenges that I've had is just taking the huge massive stuff that we just talked about and making that less scary and less big and less complicated.
So that's actually kind of right up my wheelhouse. So I'm on a team that does something very similar where we basically moved from homegrown paths to to the cloud. And now developers are facing this huge challenge where it's like, well, we never had to worry about security. We never had to worry about a WAF. We never had to worry about what IPs were available, you know, all this stuff. And they're like, and you want us to move to cloud and learn all of that? So what we've been trying to do is take some of like the lowest hanging fruit. So like enforcing our IAM policies for users and passwords. And so we'll bake that into every account that we set up. And we all have it set up in organizations, for instance, in AWS for billing purposes. And so we'll start laying down some of these easy, quick win policies. And before long, you tell developers, well, your list of things went from here to here. So now all you have to do is follow this. And so a lot of our business areas want to go to cloud, so that's kind of a helpful thing for us. And so we can say, well, look, here's the agreement. We cover these things for you. Now we can say we're actually bringing something to the table here. We're not just standing in your way, but these are the kinds of things that you'll need to consider going forward. So I guess that's kind of how we solve that.
Right on. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I work with lots of different AWS customers and partners, and the thing I'm seeing with them is with these new microservices type architectures, they're great in that they're easy to change. I mean, that's the whole purpose. But the downside is the thing that Dave mentioned this morning. It's managing complexity. The complexity is going way up, and that's the challenge that I'm seeing, and that's what we saw a little bit today. How to manage this exploding complexity is the biggest challenge that I'm seeing.
I want to ask a different question. So we have people moving between disciplines, like developers to SRE, SRE to developers, I don't know, all sorts of things. What's the more challenging path in your experience?
So I've actually gone from dev to SRE kind of sort of in a roundabout way. And so like that's still a journey. There are still a lot of moments like I literally have been doing Terraform for 2 years and learned things I didn't know, like watching this intro. I'm like, oh, that's okay. I see what this is now instead of me just copying and pasting. It's like, all right. So like this fundamentally like feels, and I kind of, of course, like it just kind of feels fundamentally scarier when you're doing it. Like it feels harder to just like do a test thing unless like an org is built up around that. It's like especially at a very small company, you don't necessarily have the resources to spend building up small dev clusters, building up small dev accounts. And like we should, and like that's a thing we should prioritize. But like, man, that makes it so much harder because it's so much harder to just test like Terraform locally. Like it just feels, yeah.
As much as I love and value an ops background, I think it's almost impossible to be an SRE without a development background. I think you've got to be an experienced, not just a development background, but an experienced senior developer that then has an interest in operations to be a good SRE, in my opinion.
I'd echo that as well. I think that at a bare minimum, I don't necessarily know if you need to be like a senior coding person, but I think at a bare minimum, you need to have a functional coding language that you can automate with, because I think that's one of the biggest parts. So I'd agree with that.
I do think, I mean, I think this is my feeling as well. Not that you can't be a good SRE or like, you know, DevOps person without a developer background, but it's much scarier, actually, I think, for people without development background to start doing development than vice versa. But I could be wrong about this, right? I don't know. Nathan?
I'm going to let someone else talk.
Go ahead.
I only do infrastructure code, especially Kubernetes, out of duress, in anger, or late on Fridays when I'm compelled to. So this is from a position of ignorance. But Minikube I've used to good effect, to your point about, so I'm not sure if people have used it. You can run a single node Kubernetes cluster on your laptop, paying literally nothing other than keeping your cats warm if it gets hot. So try that.
So to kind of come at your question from a different angle, one thing I've noticed, and not necessarily in our company, but in other companies, is that developers are kind of the breadwinners. So like when people consider IT a cost center, and that's largely going away now, which is really nice. But developers are the cash cows. They're the ones bringing in the features. They're the ones helping in new customers. They're the ones, you know, with the new apps and the shiny stuff. Whereas the ops people are more getting the tail end of, well, this new shiny thing is horribly optimized on the back end, and these servers are going down. And if you can't directly point to a code change that coincides perfectly with that, then you're kind of stuck holding the bag. So I think from a infrastructure, or sorry, a organizational wide perspective, it is a little bit easier being a developer, but that's just my opinion.
Hey, so first of all, awesome talk. I just want to say I've worked at AWS for 7 years, and I still can't figure out how to do cidre blocks. But I love this journey. I love it so much. Like I see it a lot internally at Amazon. I see it in AWS. I see it from our customers, and like everyone goes through this, right? It's like overwhelming. Like, oh no, like there's this entire world of things that we have to learn. And I totally agree with all of you. Like it's a learning curve. It's tough. Like things can go wrong. But I also think it's super empowering once you like own that and like you understand it, because you can do anything now, right? Like you can use AWS to its fullest potential if you want. You can decide to make like really crazy changes if you want. You can have like certainty and like autonomy. So I don't know. I just want to echo, like, I know that this is something that a lot of people go through, but I really enjoy like that you've done it, and like I know you, like just from watching your talk, you feel super empowered now, and I love that. I love seeing that in customers. So kudos.
Which is a great segue into our second question for the conversation also, which is, what successes have you had in this area? So we've talked about challenges. Let's hear about some successes.
So I'm going to be that really bad person just to counter really quick. So I'm really curious about everyone saying that being a developer is a prerequisite for SRE. I do come from the software side, technically from testing rather than software, but automating is the easiest bit. Knowing what you should care about is the hard bit. And so for me, it's like knowing things like stampeding herd back like on retries, and knowing some of these things that ops people just, oh yeah, that's how that works and things. So, you know, just like everything else in DevOps, the collaboration is what I find has been the most powerful, but actually I do think that there's a bit of, a bit of coding overhaul on that people assume that that's worth more, and sometimes look at the ops side.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think you need both, and I think you need a proclivity to one or the other, but you don't need to like be exclusively like a developer who moved to operations, or an operations person who moved to development. I think you need a little bit of both, and the best part of teams is that you have both of those, and that is where the DevOps feedback loop really works the best, is that you get that cross collaboration.
So I'd be remiss not to mention that by and large at Amazon, at AWS, we don't have the SRE role. We actually do all the SRE activities, but we do it within our teams. And there's just and so I would call this one of the successes, is that we have tremendous operational institutional knowledge, which we spread, and we train. We do a great job of training all our engineers in operations. And that's been one of the things that's been really helpful.
So I would actually say, for me, talking about the success question, I'm actually originally a writer that came to both dev and ops at the same time. So I'd say probably my biggest success is actually making it that far, and a lot of that had to do with getting dropped into a legacy pipeline that no one actually knew how it worked, and it was the entire production system for everything. But I do want to say that I have to be the weird one and say that I don't think great SREs come from having a really strong development background. I think instead it's, can you actually take a look at the world from a different perspective, a holistic perspective, and find the best way forward? So that might be a strong dev. It might be a great ops person. Or it could be someone coming in from some random profession, scientist. I've seen a lot of scientists, things like that, where they can take a look at something and go, you know what, we can do better. And so to me, that's what a good SRE is. It's not necessarily great ops or great dev. It's, how can I take a look at this whole thing?
Yeah, I'll iterate that. One of the best ones on my team, you're looking for people that are going to be curious and look into things and stuff. And so this guy was a piano tuner. 7 years ago, he was a piano tuner. Started working IT operations, like loading tapes into backup systems, and then it just progressed up forward to things. So yes, it's just having that curiosity to want to dig in to those gnarly problems that nobody else, or that people think is beneath them or beneath others, and they're the ones that I think bubble up because they want to figure out how it works.
Well, I'll say that while I am an engineer who's done some terraforming, I realized through that process that I might never want to cross the line into the SRE land. And it's not because of it seems like a bigger set of problems and a different set of problems over there, but it's just that my core caring a lot of times gets to the business sense and for my customers and making my services run for my customers. And I can care over to the SRE land a little bit, but I don't care. I realize when I talk to the SREs that they get deeper into that caring of the infrastructure and the setup, and they get joy from it, from a lot of what they're doing, and I get anxiety. And so I see, maybe I'll stop, I'll go over here. Thank you. I appreciate you over there. I'll stay on my side.
I was just going to say, to your point, I've witnessed the power in an organization of the one person that's actually knows what's in all the docs.
I would say that I think all of this conversation is like a huge win, just because it forces all the tools that we're using, like kubectl and Terraform and CloudFormation, like all these AWS tools and like Azure tools, to be better, to be more accessible, to be like correct and safe by default. So I know personally, like in the teams that I've worked on, this is something we're super interested in. So I think that's a huge win, just for the entire community. It's forcing a lot of this undifferentiated heavy loading, like how do I set up a VPC? Like how do I partition these subnets, just to like a good standard pattern. So I think that's a big win.
So thank you, David. You're our segue person, because we're just about ready for a third question, which was, if you were a magician, a wizard, and I gave you a magic wand, what would you want to see in 2 to 5 years? And remember, you don't have to build it. Like, someone else will do that.
I want IAM policy documents that make sense.
What I really want to see is, I want to see some really great tutorials that give people hands-on opportunities to experience ops work and SRE work themselves without having to have 1,001 AWS instances or having to work in an enterprise. That's what I want.
I think one thing that'd be really handy is, a lot of docs have an example like, oh, you can do X thing by doing this code block, and you can copy and paste it, and that's all well and good. I almost feel like there needs to be like a level 2 of that. Like, okay, you've done the basic thing. Anyone can do this now. Now, this is how you do it with 3 loops and with this bunch of, when your actual real world conditions, when you're trying to match this in with several other pieces of logic, how's that going to work? So I guess I kind of wish I had a magic wand to make docs a little more advanced once you've gotten past that first part.
Yeah, I think it's fair for you to say, like, I enjoy some of this, but I don't want to get as deep in it as some of the people who work on infrastructure full time. And I think we're already marching towards it, but commoditizing a lot of it is great. Like, the people who maintain Kubernetes are like, I can't wait for people to stop talking about Kubernetes. Like, we should be 2 more layers above this, in no time. So, yeah, looking forward to when we can have more conversations that are business driven rather than infrastructure driven.
A lot of the docs tell you how to do it, but not why you should do it that way. So understanding the why it helps in the pattern and helps in people learning.
So this is the part where, like, I don't have to build it, but like if I had a magic wand, my docs will be self-writing and auto-updating to the latest version of my product.
I've got one more magic wand request, and that's having broken systems that people can just go try to fix. So wonderful tutorials with actual real-time broken systems that are like prod to go play with.
I think a lot more focus on application complexity and how to deal with that rather than infrastructure complexity.
I think a big one for me, at least, would be we have all different cloud sources. We have on-prem, we have everything. If there was a single true I don't want to say pane of glass because I've heard that so many times just today alone, but a true one-stop shop to, like, say a developer wants to get started and they can actually compare in real time what kind of features each place offers. Like, we had a customer wanted to do a chat bot, so they went through, you know, AWS and Google and IBM Watson and all this other stuff, and they had to do all this manual work to, you know, type in or put in the queries by hand and everything like that. And so just having the ability to compare in real time, because that's the trick, real time, which cloud is the best at doing this right now.
As long as we are wishing for things, so why not apply machine learning to this and build self-healing infrastructure, right? I would love to contribute. I am a ML noob, but if anything needs to be self-healing, it's all the infrastructure that we stand up, so let's build it.
Sorry. I think I'd like to see a takeoff of the software, more software-defined rather than code-defined infrastructure. So things like AWS Cloud Development Kit and Plumi that the guys outside are talking about, where people can choose the language that they want to define infrastructure rather than having to learn a whole new kind of structure. Especially because Terraform's a little bit ropey in a few ways, so it'd be good to move towards something where you can just do TypeScript or Java or whatever to actually build your infrastructure.
So the one thing that you had brought up, you know, was sort of the reluctance to put your own personal credit card number into one of the cloud providers for doing things, and I hear that a lot. And you sort of think about it from one way. You look at it as like, well, if you're investing in yourself to be better on there, but also, what if I go horribly wrong? So I asked, is like, you should have, when you set up your account, here's the training wheel option saying, okay, here's the 1 cup of coffee. I don't want it to go over that much per month of how much I'm spending, as opposed to it by default, at least when I set it up, it was unlimited. So maybe you should have, like, by default, some like price bands to say, don't go out of this. You can put controls on later, but by default, maybe they should have those training wheels there so people feel safer.
CloudWatch does that, right? I'm not mistaken. It definitely does alerts. Can it also not just kill things?
If you set it up.
Yeah.
If anyone knows of a way to actually do that, I'd love to know.
He said if anyone knows of a way to do that, he would like to know. So how to actually kill off stuff. Yeah. Okay, that brings us to time. So we are now up for a break. So this conversation certainly doesn't have to, nor should it end here, but it is going to end here. If that makes any sense, good for the transcription for sure. So another round of applause, both for our presenter, for Cora, and for all of you for participating in the conversation. Thank you.